I fell in love with my best friend's mother. It wasn't a crush. It was an earthquake that cracked my world in two, and in the space between, I found a version of myself I never knew existed. This is how something beautiful almost destroyed us all. Before we begin story, subscribe my channel for more lesbian stories. The water was a cool, liquid shock against my skin, a temporary antidote to the relentless summer heat and the chaos in my head. Floating on my back in the pristine blue of the Kensington family pool, I stared up at a sky so vast and empty it felt like a metaphor for my future. I was 19, a college freshman adrift, and this suburban backyard was the only place where the constant hum of anxiety, about grades, about my identity, about the gnawing feeling that I was failing at adulthood, seemed to quiet, if only for a moment. Then I heard her voice, low, melodic, and unforgettable. "I didn't expect to find you here, Alex." I jerked, sinking slightly before regaining my balance. Maya Kensington, Chloe's mom, stood at the pool's edge. A light breeze played with the hem of her simple linen dress. At 42, she possessed a poise I could only dream of, a calm self-assurance that seemed to radiate from her. I'd known her for years, but today, her gaze felt different. It didn't skate over me. It lingered, seeing past the surface, and something dormant and dangerous within me stirred to life. I pushed off the wall, trying to sound nonchalant. "Chloe's at the library," I said, my voice betraying me with a slight tremor. "I just needed to get out of my own head for a while." Maya smiled, a slow, gentle curve of her lips. She slipped off her sandals and sat at the edge, dipping her feet into the water with a soft sigh. "Rough day?" she asked. Her tone was soft, yet probing, as if she could see the tangled mess of my thoughts. I nodded, looking away, focusing on the way the sunlight fractured on the water's surface. Rough day. That was an understatement. My life felt like a poorly written play. The pressure of my pre-law courses was a constant weight. My breakup with Sarah 3 months ago had left me feeling invisible, like I was a background character in everyone else's story. And the most terrifying part was the sheer, blank uncertainty of who I was supposed to become. Chloe's house, with its predictable rhythms and familiar comforts, had become my sanctuary. "You're not the only one who needs an escape sometimes," Maya said, her voice dropping to a more intimate register. She leaned forward, her dark hair falling over one shoulder like a curtain. "Sometimes I come out here after midnight, when the whole world is asleep, just to remember what real silence feels like." My throat went dry. Was she flirting? The thought was so absurd, so electrifying, I immediately dismissed it. She was Chloe's mom. Married. Straight. But the way her eyes held mine, the subtle invitation in her confession, felt intentional. I splashed water lightly, a nervous gesture to break the spell. Swimming in the dark. Isn't that against some fundamental suburban code? She laughed, a rich, warm sound that sent a flush of heat straight to my face. "Rules are often just suggestions, Alex. You'll figure that out eventually." She stood, brushing her hands on her dress. "Come inside when you're done. I just made a pitcher of iced tea." I watched her walk back to the sprawling modern house, her silhouette graceful against the deepening gold of the late afternoon sun. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sank beneath the surface, the cool water closing over my head, hoping it would drown out the forbidden thoughts. But they persisted, loud and clear, following me into the deep end. Later, the kitchen was cool and smelled of mint and lemon. Maya handed me a glass of iced tea, condensation beading on the glass. Our fingers brushed, a fleeting, accidental touch that felt like a static shock. "So," she said, leaning against the granite countertop, her eyes soft with curiosity, "what's got you so tangled up in there?" She gestured vaguely toward my head. I hesitated, the ice cubes in my glass clinking as my hand trembled. How could I possibly explain? How could I articulate that my ex-girlfriend had made me feel like an interim, a placeholder until someone better came along? That the pressure to have my entire life mapped out was suffocating me? That I felt like I was performing a version of Alex that everyone else expected, and I was terrified the real me was a profound disappointment? But Maya listened. She didn't glance at her phone or offer platitudes. She just listened, her full attention a quiet gift. "You're so young," she said finally, her voice laced with a wistfulness I didn't understand. "You're supposed to be a little lost. It's the privilege of your age. Don't let anyone else's map tell you where you're supposed to go." Her words didn't feel condescending. They felt like permission. They struck a chord so deep within me that I had to look away, my throat tight with an emotion I couldn't name. That night, I lay on the familiar softness of Chloe's sofa bed, staring at the shadows the streetlights cast on the ceiling. Maya's voice echoed in my mind, her words about freedom and self-discovery mingling with the phantom memory of her touch. I was in deep, dangerous water, and a treacherous part of me never wanted to swim to shore. The following week, I found myself at Chloe's house more often than not. We were supposed to be studying, but mostly we lounged by the pool, the thick, humid air making concentration impossible. "Mom's been in a weirdly good mood lately," Chloe mentioned idly, squinting against the sun as she scrolled through her phone. "She keeps asking about you." My stomach performed a gymnastic flip. "Me?" I asked, hoping I sounded casually indifferent. "Yeah. Thinks you're thoughtful or something." Chloe shrugged, entirely oblivious to the earthquake her words triggered inside me. "Says you have an old soul." I risked a glance toward the house. Through the large glass patio door, I could see Maya in the kitchen, arranging a bouquet of sunflowers in a vase. She caught my eye through the glass, and her lips curved into a small, private smile that felt meant only for me. I looked away quickly, my pulse a wild drum in my ears. This was treacherous, forbidden territory, but a part of me, the part that was tired of being lost and lonely, wanted to plant a flag on it. One afternoon, Chloe was called into her part-time job at the local boutique, leaving Maya and me alone in the quiet, sun-drenched house. The silence felt different now. Charged, expectant. We ended up on the patio as the day softened into the golden hour, the world painted in hues of amber and rose. "You're not like Chloe's other friends, Alex," Maya said, her gaze not on the sunset but on me. "They're all surface noise and future plans. You notice things. You feel things deeply. I can see it." "I don't know about that," I mumbled, my hands trembling slightly around my glass of lemonade. "Most of the time I just feel overwhelmed. Like I'm failing a test I didn't know I was taking." She leaned forward, her voice dropping, forcing me to lean in to hear her. "We all feel that way sometimes. But you're honest about it. You don't try to hide behind a facade. That's a rare kind of courage, you know." Her words were a key, unlocking a vault inside me I kept tightly sealed. I found myself telling her things I'd never given voice to, the crushing weight of my parents' expectations, the specific, cutting words Sarah had used during our breakup that still echoed in my mind at 3 a.m., the terrifying blankness I saw when I tried to picture my future. I told her I feared I was fundamentally broken, incapable of the kind of easy, certain love everyone else seemed to master. She listened, her eyes never leaving mine, absorbing my fears without judgment. "You're stronger than you know," she said softly when I finally fell silent, my confession hanging in the air between us. "You just have to learn to trust yourself." I wanted to believe her more than I had ever wanted anything. All I could think about was the scant few inches between her hand and mine on the wrought iron table. I wanted to bridge that gap, to feel the solid reality of her skin against mine, but the weight of who she was, Chloe's mom, Mark Kensington's wife, a pillar of the PTA, held me back like an invisible chain. The tension became a third presence in the house, humming quietly in the space between us whenever we were in the same room. A week later, under the flimsy guise of helping clean up after a family barbecue, we found ourselves alone at the kitchen sink. The air was thick with the scent of charcoal and citronella. We moved in a silent, efficient dance. I washed, she dried. Our arms brushed as we passed a wet plate, the contact sending a jolt through my nervous system. The sound of the running water seemed deafening. "Why have you been avoiding me?" she asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the soapy water in the sink, not looking at me. The question was so direct it stole my breath. "I'm not," I lied, my voice tight. "It's just complicated." She turned to face me then, her expression open and vulnerable, all her usual poise stripped away. "Complicated how, Alex?" I couldn't meet her eyes. I stared at a droplet of water tracing a path down the faucet. I don't know what I'm doing, Maya. I don't know what this is. I gestured weakly between us. She stepped closer, the space between us shrinking to almost nothing. Her hand hovered near mine on the countertop. Alex, she whispered, my name a prayer on her lips. You don't have to have it all figured out. You're 19. Sometimes you just have to feel. The world narrowed to the space between our bodies. The kitchen, the house, the entire outside world dissolved into a blur. I could feel the heat radiating from her, smell the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. For a single, heart-stopping heartbeat, I was certain she was going to close the final distance. I held my breath. But then the back door swung open with a crash, and Chloe's laughter, loud and bright, filled the room. God, it's hot out there. Did you guys save me any potato salad? We sprang apart as if electrocuted. Maya turned briskly back to the sink, her shoulders tense, while I fumbled with a glass, nearly dropping it. The moment was shattered, the spell broken, but the charge it left in the air lingered for the rest of the evening. I tried to stay away after that. I filled my days with library sessions and forced hangouts with acquaintances from my dorm. But my resolve was paper-thin. A few days later, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, though I knew instantly who it was. It's Maya. Chloe gave me your number for emergencies. Thinking of you. The house is too quiet. I stared at the words, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I shouldn't reply. This was the point of no return. But my thumb moved of its own volition. I know the feeling. Her response was almost immediate. Can you meet me? The bench by the lake in Overton Park. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I knew, with a terrifying and thrilling certainty, that if I went, nothing would ever be the same again. The safe, predictable world I knew would fracture. I typed out a one-word reply, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. Yes. Part 2. The fallout. The bench by the lake was old, its green paint chipped and weathered. I arrived 10 minutes early, my stomach a tight knot of nerves and anticipation. The park was quiet, bathed in the hazy gold of a summer afternoon. When I saw her walking toward me, a simple sundress swaying around her calves, a large sun hat shading her face, my breath caught. This was a version of Maya I hadn't seen before, clandestine, a little nervous, entirely real. She sat down, leaving a careful foot of space between us. For a long moment, we just watched the ducks glide across the pond's glassy surface. This is impossible, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't looking at me, but at her hands, clenched tightly in her lap. I have a family. A life. You're just starting yours. This is the definition of irresponsible. Her words were a bucket of cold water, but the pain in them kept me from freezing. What if it's not impossible? I countered, my own voice low and fierce with a feeling I could no longer deny. What if it's just complicated? And don't I get a say in what I want? You keep telling me to figure out what I want. Well, I'm trying. And what is it you want, Alex? She asked, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were glistening, filled with a war I could feel raging inside her. You, I said. The word was simple, unadorned, and utterly true. It hung in the humid air between us, terrifying and liberating. A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She reached for my hand, her fingers tentatively lacing with mine. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. It was the first real, intentional touch, and it felt like a completion, like a circuit finally closing. I want you, too, she admitted, the confession sounding like both a relief and a condemnation. But we can't, not like this. Not in secret, in parks, behind my daughter's back. It's not fair to you, and it's not who I want to be. We sat there for an hour, hands clasped, talking in hushed, urgent tones. We agreed on a pause. Not an end, but a cessation of this secret life. We would not text, not meet. We would focus on untangling our own separate lives. She needed to figure out who she was outside of being a wife and mother. I needed to build a life that wasn't orbiting Chloe's family. It was the most painful, mature decision I had ever made, and it felt like tearing my own heart out. The silence that followed was an physical ache. The first week was the worst. Every notification on my phone was a stab of hope, immediately followed by a crushing wave of disappointment when it wasn't her. I threw myself into my summer sociology class, annotating texts until my vision blurred, trying to drown out the memory of her touch. Chloe noticed the change. "You've been quiet," she said one evening as we scrolled through Netflix. "Everything okay with you? You seem sad." The guilt was a poison in my veins. "Just stressed about this paper," I lied, forcing a smile. "And missing Sarah, I guess." It was a coward's move, using my old heartbreak as a shield for the new, more dangerous one. Meanwhile, I watched Maya from a distance at their house. She was quieter, too, more reserved. She and Mark seemed to move around each other with a polite, careful distance. The pause was holding, but the tension it was meant to resolve was only growing, a storm building behind a fragile dam. The dam broke on a sweltering Friday night. Chloe was at a party. Mark was away on a business trip. The house was dark and silent. My willpower, stretched thin over weeks, finally snapped. I got on my bike and rode through the heavy, warm air, my mind a chorus of self-recrimination and desperate need. I didn't text. I just went, standing in the shadow of the large oak tree in their backyard, looking at the dark windows of the house I knew so well. I felt like a ghost, a trespasser in my own life. A porch light flicked on. The sliding door opened, and Maya stepped out, wrapped in a thin robe. She didn't look surprised to see me. She walked slowly to the pool's edge, her figure illuminated by the underwater lights that turned the water a glowing, ethereal blue. "Alex," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I knew you'd come." "I couldn't stay away," I whispered, stepping out of the shadows. "This pause, it's killing me." "It's killing me, too," she admitted. She untied her robe and let it fall to a patio chair. Underneath, she wore a simple black swimsuit. Without another word, she slipped into the water, disappearing beneath the glowing surface for a moment before emerging, her hair slicked back. "Come in." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. I kicked off my shoes, peeled off my socks, and slid into the cool water in my shorts and t-shirt. The shock was immediate. We floated there, feet barely touching the bottom, staring at each other across the ripples we made. "The pause is over," she stated, her eyes holding a new, fierce determination. "It was a noble idea, but it's a lie. This," she gestured between us, "is the only real thing I've felt in years." She moved then, closing the distance between us in 2 strong strokes. The water swirled around us. Her hands came up to cradle my face, and then she was kissing me. It was nothing like the tentative brush in the kitchen. This was deep, hungry, and full of weeks of pent-up longing. It was a confession and a surrender. My hands found her waist, pulling her flush against me, the cool water doing nothing to douse the fire spreading through my veins. The world ceased to exist. There was only her mouth on mine, her skin under my hands, the quiet lapping of the water against the pool walls. We broke apart, gasping for air, our foreheads resting together. "Okay," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. No more pause. We stayed in the pool for what felt like both an eternity and a single second, talking in low whispers, stealing kisses, building a new, secret world where only we existed. It was perfect. It was everything. And it was about to shatter. We didn't hear the car pull into the driveway. We didn't hear the front door open. The first we knew of it was the sudden flood of light from the patio and a voice, small and shattered, cutting through the night. "Mom." We jerked apart as if we'd been struck by lightning. Chloe stood on the patio, her keys dangling from her hand, her face a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. She had come home from the party early. Maya's face went sheet white. "Chloe, honey." Chloe's eyes, wide and swimming with tears, snapped from her mother's face to mine. The betrayal in them was a physical blow. "And you," she whispered, the words cracking. "My best friend." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. What could I possibly say? The evidence was irrefutable. My wet clothes, our proximity, the charged air, it painted a picture more vivid than any words. "How could you?" Chloe choked out, her voice rising into a sob. She looked at her mother, her entire body trembling. How could you? Then she turned and fled back into the house, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot in the silent night. Maya scrambled out of the pool, grabbing her robe. I have to go to her, she said, her voice frantic with panic. Her eyes met mine for a split second, filled with a terror and a regret so profound it stole my breath. And then she was gone, running after her daughter, leaving me alone in the glowing blue water. I hauled myself out, my body heavy with a dread that felt like a physical weight. I stood there, dripping onto the concrete, the summer night suddenly cold and hostile. The secret was out. The perfect, stolen world we had built over the last hour lay in ruins at my feet. I had lost my best friend. I had likely destroyed Maya's family. And as I started the long, shame-filled walk home in my soaking wet clothes, I knew, with a certainty that hollowed me out, that I had also lost her. Part 3. The Reckoning. The walk home was a blur of shivering cold and searing heat. Each step squelched in my soaked sneakers, a mortifying rhythm to the chorus of shame screaming in my head. Cars passed, their headlights illuminating me like a fugitive. I didn't care. The world had already seen the worst of me. Chloe's face, that perfect snapshot of shattered trust, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. I let myself into my dark, silent house. My parents were away for the weekend, and peeled off my wet clothes, leaving them in a sodden heap on the bathroom floor. I stood under a scalding shower until my skin was raw, but I couldn't wash away the feeling of Maya's hands on my skin or the sound of Chloe's voice. The two sensations were now permanently fused, pleasure and pain intertwined. I didn't sleep. I stared at my phone, a dead weight in my hand. No calls. No texts. The silence from the Kensington house was a louder scream than any accusation. I had become a ghost to them, an unperson. The what ifs were a torturous loop. What if I had stayed away? What if we had kept the pause? What if Chloe had come home an hour later? The next morning, fueled by a desperate, masochistic need for punishment, I went to their house. The sun was obnoxiously bright, the birds chirping mockingly. The suburban perfection of the street felt like a lie. I rang the doorbell, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The door swung open. It was Chloe. Her eyes were red raw and puffy, her face blotchy. She looked at me not with anger, but with a cold, weary disgust that was infinitely worse. "What do you want, Alex?" Her voice was flat, scraped hollow. I need to explain. Please." She let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Explain what? How you and my mother were, what? Discussing poetry in the pool at midnight? In your clothes?" She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "How long?" "It's not like that," I stammered, the lie pathetic even to my own ears. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt you." "It just happened," she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "She's married, Alex. She's my mom. Do you have any idea how messed up this is? Any idea at all?" "I know," I whispered, tears finally spilling over, hot and shameful. "I know. I tried to stop. But I love her, Chloe." The words hung in the air between us, stark and undeniable. I saw them hit her, a fresh wave of pain crashing over her features. She took a step back, as if my confession were something contagious. "You love her," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "What about me? Did you ever think about me? Or was I just the convenient doorway into my own house?" "Every day," I choked out, my voice breaking. "I thought about you every single day. I swear I did. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop feeling this way." She looked at me for a long, terrible moment, and I saw the finality in her eyes. Our friendship, a decade long, was being severed right there on the doorstep. "I need time, Alex. I can't even look at you right now." She started to close the door. "Don't come back." The click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. That afternoon, a text finally came from Maya. "We need to talk. Meet me at Overton Park." The same bench. I found her there, looking like she had aged 10 years overnight. She was hunched over, a cardboard coffee cup held tightly in both hands. She didn't look up as I approached. "Emma's devastated," she said without preamble, her voice raspy from crying. And Mark, he doesn't know the specifics yet, but he will. He came home early. He knew something was wrong the moment he saw us. I sat beside her, my hands clenched into fists on my knees. What do we do? She shook her head, a slow, weary motion. I don't know. I've spent my entire adult life trying to be what everyone else needed. The perfect wife. The perfect mother. The perfect neighbor. And with you, for the first time, I was selfish. I wanted something for myself. And now? She gestured vaguely at the air, at the wreckage of our lives. Now we're all paying for it. Don't say that, I said, my voice fierce with a protective instinct I didn't know I possessed. What we feel, it's real. It's not wrong. She finally looked at me, her beautiful eyes swimming in a sea of regret. It's real, Alex. I don't doubt that for a second. But it's also impossible. We built this on a foundation of secrets. It was always going to collapse. We sat in a heavy silence, the weight of her truth pressing down on us. There was no fighting it. The cost was too high, the damage too great. I need to fix things with Chloe, she said finally, her voice firming with a resolve that broke my heart. Or at least try. And I have to face Mark. And you need to figure out what you want. Not for me, not as an escape from your own life. But for you. I nodded, my throat so tight I could barely breathe. I don't want to lose you. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold as they laced with mine. It felt like a goodbye. You won't, she whispered, but it sounded like a hope, not a promise. But we need time. A real pause. Not a week, not a month. Time to heal. To grow up. She gave a sad, small smile. Both of us. The weeks that followed were a desolate landscape. The silence from Maya was absolute. Chloe blocked my number. I threw myself into the final weeks of my summer class, acing the exam with a detached, manic focus. I started seeing a therapist at the campus health center, a kind, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Evans who helped me untangle the knot of guilt, desire, and identity. I learned words for what I was feeling: enmeshment, codependency, grief. I began to understand that my attraction to Maya wasn't just about her. It was about the stability she represented, the maternal warmth I craved, the escape from my own turbulent youth. Dr. Evans didn't judge. She simply asked, who is Alex without this drama? What does she want to build? It was the hardest question I'd ever had to answer. Slowly, tentatively, I started building. I joined a queer student alliance on campus, finding a community where I didn't have to explain myself. I started running, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the emotional one. I was building a life, brick by painful brick, that was entirely my own. One night, almost 2 months after the pool, I found myself biking past the Kensington house on autopilot. I hadn't planned to go there, but my feet knew the way. I stood across the street, hidden in the shadows, and looked at the windows. The porch light was on. A new, vibrant wreath hung on the door. Life had gone on. Then I saw her. Not Maya, but Chloe. She was taking out the trash. She looked older, more grounded. She paused on the porch, looking out into the night, and for a moment, her gaze swept over my hiding place. She didn't see me, but I saw her. And for the first time, the sight of her didn't bring a sharp stab of pain, but a dull, persistent ache of loss and a fragile flicker of hope. A few days later, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a text from Chloe. Hey, I saw you were in Poly SCI 101 with Jess Morrison. She said you're actually decent. I'm struggling with the midterm paper. Can I see your outline? No pressure. It was a small thing. A transactional message about school. But it was a thread, thrown across a chasm. I didn't respond immediately. I took a deep breath, my heart thumping a rhythm of cautious optimism. I typed back, my hand steady. Yeah, of course. I can email it to you. It's good to hear from you, Chloe. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was a first, tentative step on a very long road. And for now, in the quiet of my dorm room, With the ghost of Maya's touch finally beginning to fade from my skin, it was enough. Part 4. The distance between us. 2 years later. The campus coffee shop was a familiar cacophony of grinding beans, hissing steam, and the low hum of student chatter. I was tucked into my usual corner, a fortress of textbooks and highlighted notes, wrestling with a constitutional law case study. The air smelled of roasted coffee and ambition. This was my life now, a curated, purposeful chaos. I was 21, a political science major with a clear-eyed focus on law school, a far cry from the lost teenager who had floated aimlessly in a backyard pool. Therapy had given me a language for my past. I understood now that my feelings for Maya had been a perfect storm. A craving for the stability I lacked, a desire to feel seen by someone who seemed to have life figured out, and the intoxicating thrill of the forbidden. Dr. Evans had helped me see that I wasn't a villain, just a young woman who had gotten terribly, messily lost. The guilt over Chloe had never fully vanished, but it had softened, transformed into a sober understanding of the consequences of my choices. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Chloe. You still at the grind? On my way. Need a caffeine for and your brain. A smile touched my lips. Our friendship was a carefully mended vase. You could still see the cracks if you looked closely, but it was strong and it held water. It had taken a full year of tentative texts, awkward coffee meetings, and painful, honest conversations to get here. We had to learn each other again, not as inseparable girls, but as women who had been deeply wounded by one another and had chosen, painstakingly, to rebuild. She slid into the chair opposite me minutes later, her cheeks flushed from the autumn chill. I'm dying. Professor Evans is trying to kill us with this pre-colonial history paper. Which Evans? I asked, pushing my half-finished latte toward her. Not your therapist, thankfully. The one with the monotone voice and a personal grudge against paragraphs. She took a grateful sip of my coffee. You're a lifesaver. This was our new normal. Easy, supportive, with the ghost of our past acknowledged but no longer taking up space at the table. She had told me, over one of our difficult conversations, that the discovery had forced her own reckoning with her parents' marriage. She'd seen the quiet discontent she'd been willfully ignoring. It didn't excuse our betrayal, she'd been clear on that, but it had given her a context that eventually allowed for forgiveness. I got a letter, I said quietly, the words feeling both heavy and light. Chloe froze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips. She knew who I meant without asking. Over the past 2 years, Maya's name had become a rare, careful mention between us. And it was sent to my parents' house. My mom forwarded it. I pulled a single, cream-colored envelope from my notebook. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. I haven't opened it yet. For 2 years, there had been only silence. A clean, brutal break. I had honored the pause, using the time to become a person who didn't need saving. I had no idea if she had done the same. Chloe studied my face. Do you want me to leave? No, I said, and I meant it. Stay. My hands were steady as I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The words were sparse, but they hit me with the force of a physical blow. Alex, I hope this finds you well. I've thought of writing 1,000 times, but words always failed me. They felt too small for the apology I owe you, and too large for the quiet hope I carry. The gallery on Elm Street is showing my paintings. The opening is this Friday, 7 p.m. It's called The Distance Between Us. I would understand if you didn't come, but I would be honored if you did. I read it twice, then handed it silently to Chloe. She scanned it, her expression unreadable. She's painting again, she said finally, handing the letter back. She told me she was taking classes, but she didn't tell me about a show. She paused, choosing her words carefully. She moved out, you know. Got a small apartment near the river. She and Dad they're figuring out a divorce. It's amicable, mostly. Sad. I absorbed this. Maya was building her own life, too. Not as someone's wife or mother, but as an artist. Are you going to go? Chloe asked. I looked out the coffee shop window at the students hurrying past, their lives full of their own immediate dramas. I was no longer that girl in the pool, desperate for a lifeline. I was someone who had learned to swim on her own. Yes, I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the word. I think I have to. The gallery on Elm Street was a bright, white space with polished concrete floors. A small crowd milled about, holding glasses of wine, speaking in the hushed, appreciative tones of an art opening. My heart was a wild drum in my chest as I stepped inside. And then I saw them. The paintings were not what I expected. They weren't abstract explosions of emotion. They were hyper-realistic, almost photographic, but imbued with a profound, aching loneliness. A single, empty chair by a window, sunlight pooling on its vacant seat. A perfectly made bed, the pillows untouched. A view of a backyard pool at night, the water a dark, impenetrable blue, reflecting a single, bright star. The series was titled, simply, The Distance Between Us. I moved through the room, each painting a punch to the gut. They were all about absence. About the space between what is and what could be. They were about her marriage, her life, and about me. About the chasm we had fallen into. I found her standing in front of a larger canvas at the back of the gallery. It depicted a park bench, the one by the lake, seen from a distance. Two faint, ghostly impressions were visible on the seat, as if the people who had sat there had vanished, leaving only a memory of their warmth. She was listening to an older couple praise her work, a polite, professional smile on her face. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, streaked with a bit more grey she wasn't hiding. She wore a simple black dress, and there was a new confidence in her posture, a quiet ownership of her space and her talent. She was no longer just Chloe's mom. She was Maya, the artist. The couple moved away, and her eyes swept the room as if feeling my gaze. They found me, and for a moment, the professional composure fell away. The same vulnerability I'd seen on the park bench was there, raw and real. She walked toward me, her steps measured. "Alex," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered it, a low melody that resonated in my bones. "Hello, Maya." My own voice was steady. "Your work is breathtaking." "Thank you." She gestured at the painting of the bench. It was the hardest one to finish. We stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of our shared, painful history, rendered in exquisite, painful detail. "I read your letter," I said. "The one you sent to my parents' house a year ago. The one I was too angry and hurt to answer." She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. I wondered. "In it, you told me to live my life. To be brave." I took a small step closer. "So I did. I got my own apartment. I'm top of my class. I have a life, Maya. A good one. One I built myself." A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek, but she was smiling. A real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "I'm so glad, Alex. Truly." "I'm not that lost girl anymore," I whispered. "I know," she whispered back. "And I'm not that trapped woman." The space between us, so vividly depicted on the walls around us, suddenly felt like it was humming with possibility, not pain. "I'm not asking for anything," she said, her voice soft. "No promises. No grand declarations. But the distance, it feels less vast tonight than it has in a very long time." I looked at this brave, complicated woman who had shattered my world and, in doing so, had forced me to build a better one. The love I felt for her was different now. It wasn't a desperate need. It was a choice. A recognition of a soul that mirrored my own in its complexity and its capacity for growth. "I'm seeing someone," I said, and watched the careful hope in her eyes flicker, just for a second. "Her name is Dr. Evans. My therapist. She's helping me understand that some loves aren't meant to be forever. They're bridges to the person you're supposed to become." Maya nodded, a graceful acceptance of a truth she already knew. "But," I continued, my heart full and calm, "she also says that when two people grow separately and find their way back to each other as whole individuals, that's a different story altogether." I reached out, not to pull her close, but to offer my hand. An invitation, not a demand. She looked at my hand, then back at my face. The ghost was gone from her eyes, replaced by a clear, present light. She slipped her hand into mine. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. It was not the frantic, desperate clasp of before. It was a connection. A new beginning. The distance between us was still there, filled with 2 years of separate lives, healing, and change. But as we stood there, hand in hand in the bright, quiet gallery, surrounded by the beautiful, painful maps of our past, it no longer felt like an ocean. It felt like a space we could finally, carefully, cross together.